The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. This is program number 839. And it is coming to you on Monday, the 3rd of October, 2016. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic, bail in criminal cases. But before getting into the topic, a few preliminary comments, beginning as usual with expressions of condolences to all families which have suffered recent bereavements. And in that context, I want to reach out to that mother and the other members of the family who suffered the sudden loss of a 16-year-old son at the onset of Tropical Storm Matthew last week. And it was painful to hear the mother say on the recording I listened to on Eyewitness News that she had spoken to the lad several times, warning him not to go outside. But he insisted on being disobedient and unfortunately met his death. I hope all of you young people listening to me and not so young would understand that you should pay heed to warnings, particularly when they come from parents and guardians. So sad. Special condolences to the families of two men who can be regarded as nation builders in their own right. Firstly, Mr. Leo Anthony, a national icon, if ever there was one. I recall when we launched the public consultations in constitutional reform in about 2002. One of the first consultations we have was at the Petit Bedell Secondary School, and one of the persons who spoke was Mr. Leo Anthony. And he made a very fundamental point that when people go to vote, they go to vote for somebody to represent them in the government. And he felt that we needed some form of constitutional mechanism whereby everybody who was elected could play a role in governance. I would like to send condolences to all the members of the Anthony family, particularly Deidre, who worked with me in the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Justice, when I was Attorney General, and of course another national icon, Mrs. Laura Anthony Brown, and the boy is well known. Also, condolences to the family of the late Mr. Crichton Bacchus, and in particular my learned friend, Mrs. K. Bacchus Batiste. Condolences to you, my sister, on the loss of your father. He was a well-known, upright, honest and solid citizen in this country, whom I had the pleasure to have served with in one of the charitable organizations in the state. Let me send out get well greetings once again to our Patriarch, His Excellency Bishop Edmund John, who is battling the results of amputation and other ailments. My brother, I know your faith is strong, and may the good Lord minister to your bodily needs. Get well greetings also to my sister Nan, Deaconess Althea Peters of our church, who is back out from the hospital. I hope it would be a long time before you have to go back into the hospital, and I hope you continue to make a good recovery. And best wishes to all persons who suffer ailments of one kind or another. Please excuse me. My good friend and brother Leo celebrated a birthday yesterday, Sunday. When I chatted with Leo today, in the presence of his wife Kim, I didn't ask him how old he was, but I did wish him all the best for his birthday. I refer to Mr. Leonard May of K&L Autos, Leo and Kim, two of my favorite people. Leo, I know that you have enjoyed your birthday, and I do hope you have many more birthdays to enjoy. Now, just before getting into the topic, let me say a word or two about Tropical Storm Matthew. As I speak, the latest I heard on the weather forecasting was that Matthew was still a few miles to the southeast of Jamaica and expected to pass somewhere between Jamaica and Haiti, so that those people in the western end of Jamaica could breathe a little easier, even though I can tell you from our experience here in the St. Vincent and Grenadines and in the Windward Islands, you're probably in for a lot of rain. So those of you in Mobe, don't celebrate too soon, and that is where my beloved daughter Arusha and her family live. But it seems as if the storm will pass somewhere between Jamaica and Haiti, and it will pass towards the eastern end of Cuba, and then the Bahamas Islands would be in its path. We in St. Vincent and Grenadines have to give God thanks that we were spared, largely. Only the one reported death, several cases of minor landslides, flooding and so on, but nothing to really complain about. We have to give God thanks. And speaking about that, you know, we used to have a holiday here called Thanksgiving in November, but that holiday was abolished when there was a rationalization of the holidays in St. Vincent and Grenadines. But today was Thanksgiving Day, or I should say is, since the day isn't finished yet, but today was a public holiday in St. Lucia. Thanksgiving Day in St. Lucia. And perhaps we should give some thought towards reinstating a day of national Thanksgiving at the end of the hurricane season. These things are very important, not in addition, but we should find some holiday elsewhere in the year that we can sacrifice for the sake of the restoration of Thanksgiving Day. Just a thought. And of course, this is Independence Month, leading up to the 27th of October, when we'll be celebrating our national independence. Now, bail in criminal cases. The concept of bail derives from the insistence in British common law of the presumption of innocence. And there is a certain logic to the idea of when persons are charged, they should be left at large until the case is heard before they are placed into custody if they are found to be guilty of the charges. After all, it is always ironic when a person is charged with committing an offense or offenses. is kept in custody until the case is heard, and then at the end of the case he is found not guilty. Persons like that who undergo incarceration pre-trial, that is before their cases are heard, and are eventually acquitted, found not guilty, have no compensation to get from the government or from anybody for the time they would have spent in custody awaiting the hearing of their cases. So the law strikes a compromise. The law says, okay, never mind you are charged, and as much as you are presumed to be innocent of the charge until such time as you are found guilty or you plead guilty, you should be at liberty. And that system is called bail. You are admitted to bail by the judicial officer who has presided over the laying of the charges, be it a magistrate or a judge. Indeed, if you apply for bail to a magistrate having been charged, and the magistrate refuses to grant you bail, you can appeal to the judge and ask the judge that because of the circumstances of your charge and your situation, ask the judge to overrule the magistrate. And that happens quite frequently. So what are the implications of bail? What are the mechanics of bail? Well, as most persons would know, the magistrate, let us assume that it's a person charged in the magistrate's court. The magistrate listens to the charge and he may ask you how you plead, or if it is a serious offense, you would not be required to plead. But the question of your bail would normally be raised either by yourself, or if you have a lawyer, the bail question will be raised by your lawyer, and your lawyer will ask the magistrate to admit you to bail. That is, to let you go until the date when you are supposed to come back to court for the hearing of the charges which have been brought against you. The magistrate has a discretion. He can let you go on your own recognizance. That is, he can say, fine, you are admitted to bail on your own recognizance. That is, you have the responsibility to make sure you come back to court. No financial implication. Or he can admit you to bail with one or more sureties. That is, the magistrate may say, fine, I'm going to give you bail, but you have to get one person or more than one, sometimes two persons, to stand bail for you. That is, to sign a document undertaking to bring you back or to make sure you come back to court on the date when you're supposed to go to answer your charge or charges. And in doing so, the magistrate will put an amount of the bail, probably $1,500, $2,000, $5,000, if it's a serious offense, $20,000, whatever the figure the magistrate feels the circumstances deserve. And the magistrate doesn't just pull a figure out of the hat or at random. There are certain guidelines, and the magistrate, from experience, would know that certain categories of offenses and offenders would require certain levels of bail. So it all depends on if you are a first-time offender or you are a habitual offender, or if you are at the risk of flight, a flight risk. That is, if you get bail, you may run away. Or you may use the period of bail to go and interfere with witnesses, to tamper with the prosecution's investigation of the offense, because police may still be investigating the offense. So that if there is good reason to believe that you're going to tamper with witnesses or humbug the prosecution in an unfair manner, then the magistrate might be likely to deny you bail based on the offense, your history, and other factors. But absent those factors, the magistrate would feel that, okay, let me put a certain figure and a monetary figure. And if you can find somebody willing to come and sign for you, to pay that amount if you don't show up when the case is heard, fine, 1 or 2 persons. Maybe even more than that. The law doesn't set a limit on how many persons can be asked to be your sureties. That is sureties. It doesn't mean that if you get bail, whether in your own recognizance in the sum of $1,500, whatever it is, it doesn't mean you have to pay the money on the spot. No. It means that if you don't show up, that money has to be paid. So if you hear somebody is admitted to bail in the sum of $2,000, they don't have to have the $2,000, or the surety doesn't have to produce the $2,000 there. It is if somehow you abscond, that is when the case is to be heard, you can't be found, you run away. Well then, the person who stood bail for you would be in trouble. They would have to come and answer to the court as to why you are not there to answer your case. And if they cannot give a very good explanation, then they would be asked to pay the amount that bail was set for initially. So signing bail for somebody is a serious matter, and you should only do it if you are sure that you can guarantee the person will come to hear the case. It involves somewhat of a risk. But more often than not, where the question of bail arises, if the prosecution feels that for good reason you might be tempted to run away, they can ask for your travel documents to be taken from you and placed in the custody of the court. And they can also ask for what are called reporting restrictions. That is, they ask for an order that you are supposed to report to a particular police station between the hours of such and such on certain days of the week or a certain day every week until the case is heard. That is to make sure that the authorities can keep track of you, so that very frequently you read in the newspaper that the person was admitted to bail and their travel documents were seized from them. And increasingly nowadays, a stop notice can be put at all the ports of exit, the places in the state from which you are likely to board an aircraft or a boat to leave. A notice is put there telling the immigration authorities who officiate at those places that you are not supposed to be allowed to leave the state. If you attempt to leave when you're on bail, well, then you could be arrested and brought before the same magistrate who imposed the bail or the judge for them to deal with the situation accordingly. So if a person is on bail, it doesn't pay the person to try and abscond, that is, to run away or not to show up when the case is called, because that's a separate offense in itself, which can get you into serious trouble. These are mechanisms designed to make sure that your freedom is respected, but you have the responsibility to make sure that you don't forfeit that respect of your freedom. If you are deemed to be a flight risk, that is, if you don't belong to St. Vincent and Grenadines, well then, it is easier for the prosecution to object to bail and for the magistrate to uphold the objection and to say, well, look, this man isn't from here, and if he gets bail, he will run away and go back to his country. So in those cases, bail is more likely to be refused, but not all the time, because sometimes you hear of a Vincentian who is charged, say, in Barbados for offenses in connection with the smuggling of drugs into Barbados, and the person may be given bail by the Barbadian courts, even though they don't belong to Barbados, and even though they may have a flight risk. So the prosecution take a lot of things into account, and the court, in the territory in which you, the Vincentian, may find yourself charged, would take several things into consideration in deciding whether your application for bail should be granted or refused. Again, the whole question is, how much of a risk is it to the authorities in that particular territory that you may run away? It all depends on the offense. Now, there are some offenses which are so serious that bail is seldom granted. For example, if you are charged with murder or manslaughter, then you're not likely to be given bail. And in fact, there is a restriction on giving bail for people charged with murder. Not impossible, because if in a murder case and a charge for murder, you apply for bail, you are refused, then if the prosecution do not try the case within a certain period of time, you can apply again to the judge, and the judge is likely to grant you bail if the prosecution can come up with a good reason why they haven't brought on the cases in the case in the specified time. So that when you read about this person being granted bail or that one being refused bail, it is not a lottery. These things are done on carefully considered principles, and everything depends on the circumstances of each particular case. It depends on the individual. Is this a first-time offender? Is this somebody with a good track record? Is this somebody who has a good job, who has family, who has responsibilities in St. Vincent and Grenadines, making it less likely that they'll be tempted to run away if they have a charge? What is the nature of the charge? Are there witnesses that the person may go and intimidate, interfere with, and so on and so on? So many things are taken into consideration when a prosecutor opposes an application by an accused person to be admitted to bail. You may find that there are two persons charged with similar offenses committed on the same occasion or on similar occasions. One may be granted bail, one may be refused. It isn't that the magistrate says eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and decides by whim whether one or the other should get the bail. No, the magistrate would usually consider and has to consider each individual case on its own circumstances. So it is not sensible for you to say, well, so-and-so got charged for wounding and he got bail, and so-and-so got charged for wounding and he didn't get bail. It all depends. Person might have been a habitual offender. Excuse me. For certain special reasons, the magistrate may find it not in the interest of justice, because after all, the magistrate has a duty to ensure that people are treated fairly. And I want to commend one of our prosecutors, and let me call his name, Counsel Delplesh. I find that that young gentleman has a refreshingly honest approach to his duties as a prosecutor. I've never been in court when he has dealt with the matter, but I follow the papers. I read his comments, and he doesn't object to bail unless he can do so on solid grounds. Usually he would say, well, let us confiscate the travel documents or put reporting restrictions on the person. So let me say good night to Brother Delplesh. Keep up the good work. It certainly have the hallmarks of a man who is bent on achieving justice. Not one of those others who seem to have a dislike for anyone who has been charged and would want to treat them in a rough manner. I'm not casting aspersions on any other prosecutor. I'm just picking out Officer Delplesh as, in my view, has the makings of a very solid jurist. The bottom line, however, is that persons should try to avoid getting into trouble, avoid getting into a situation where you may be charged for an offense. That way you don't ever have to face the question of bail. But if you have to face the question of bail, you must know that the system has clearly defined rules and principles. That is all from this program of The Law and You, program number 839. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday TV, for another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls. Let us continue praying for our brethren in Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, the Bahama Islands, and if the hurricane should go further afield, let us pray for all who might be affected. And may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.